Welcome back to the cryptowrld channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and right now, Bitcoin is currently bouncing in the immediate short term from hitting oversold. Here in the 2-hour Bitcoin RSI, we're now playing out this oversold signal, which confirmed just before the price of Bitcoin was able to wipe out this massive level of liquidity that is still sitting below the price of Bitcoin, which we need to pay attention to. So I'll be talking about that in just a moment, alongside Ethereum also bouncing from oversold in the short term, alongside Solana also doing the same, bouncing massively from this oversold signal. So I'll be talking about all of that and more later in the video, so definitely watch to the end. First of all, starting off on the weekly Bitcoin price chart, and the super trend indicator is still sitting in the red. And of course, we still have a massive bearish divergence still actively playing out on the weekly Bitcoin price chart. So not a lot has changed on this time frame over the last 1 day. And if we're taking a look at the 3-day Bitcoin price chart, right now the price of Bitcoin is still simply bouncing around in this range between this support and resistance. First of all, we still have a lot of support here at around 60,000, and also some short-term support here at around 63,000, give or take, and we have a lot of resistance at give or take 72,000. It's really where the strong area of resistance here actually starts. And now, once again, based on the weekly time frame, we're still within a larger bearish trend, which we can see here on the 3-day time frame. This is the larger multi-month bearish trend, but in the shorter term, the short to mid-term, during that larger bearish trend, we're still once again just consolidating relatively sideways between support and resistance, still potentially in a similar situation right now to what we saw around the end of 2025. But if we're zooming further into the short term, taking a look at the 2-hour Bitcoin price chart, obviously over the last 1 to 2 days, we saw that continued pullback in the short term. And like I mentioned in my last video, I said, if this pullback continues a little lower, I said in my last video, get ready, because very soon that will put this RSI down towards oversold territories. And if we hit oversold, that will be the signal to watch out for to determine a bounce as a very likely scenario coming next. And that's exactly what has now played out as predicted. Once again, we now continued a little lower, and the moment that happened, we hit oversold and confirmed an oversold signal with the 2-hour Bitcoin RSI. And as usual, an oversold signal does not necessarily guarantee the bottom forever, but it does usually mean at least some sort of bounce or some sort of relief from all of the bearish price action is quite likely, at least in the shorter term, following that oversold signal, which is obviously now playing out, as we could see. And so ultimately, when it comes to the short-term bearish and bullish movements, right now we're simply just undoing the previous short-term bearish move, which was just undoing the previous short-term bullish move, so on and so forth, which is basically a sideways price range, chopping around relatively sideways on the price chart, as we can see here on the 3-day time frame. Not a lot changed over the last 1 day. Of course, it's just the very short-term moves that have just flipped over the last 1 day, but overall still in this same price range. But some potential bad news to watch out for is that now that we have obviously hit oversold and we're bouncing in the short term, this actually happened just before we were able to wipe out this liquidity that was sitting below the price at around 62.4k, which is also what I mentioned in my last video. I said it's likely the price will be drawn towards this liquidity, but I said between back then and that liquidity would first likely hit oversold, which would mean some sort of bounce, which once again is now playing out as predicted. But that still means that we have this liquidity towards the downside at roughly 62.4k. So keep that in mind. That is ultimately still a level that could be hit at some stage, not necessarily right now, because we're still in this bounce, still playing out this oversold signal. But perhaps on that next move down, if for example we remain in this sideways price range, which consists of both short-term bullish moves and short-term bearish moves, maybe on the move back down to the lower end of the range, we could ultimately wipe out that liquidity at some stage, maybe in a few days. As always, no guarantees, but that's still a level to watch out for on the price chart. Once again, around 62.4k. And as for liquidity towards the upside, we don't have a level as significant as that level, but we do have a smaller amount building at roughly 68.2k to 68.4k, and also a small amount of liquidity building at give or take 70 70,000. But like I mentioned in my last video, once again, as we're continuing that bearish move, soon that can put the RSI into oversold, meaning expect some sort of bounce. Right now, I'm about to say the exact opposite. Now that we're playing out a bullish move in the short term, obviously this is pushing the RSI further towards the upside. And if this continues for the coming hours or over the next one day, if this continues the way it's going, then within a day, potentially, we could soon approach overbought territories, the opposite to an oversold signal. And once again, if we hit overbought, I'm not saying that definitely will happen. I'm saying if we see that overbought signal occur in the next day or so, for example, in that situation, that will be the signal to watch out for to start to determine some sort of cool off, basically slowing down the bullish price action, maybe even experiencing another slight little pullback, but still ultimately remaining in this range in between this support and this resistance. And so that is still the current situation right now in the shorter term. And of course, the bigger picture not changed at all over the last one day. And of course, if you want to trade any of these moves in the price of Bitcoin or any crypto, you need to be set up ready to go on a crypto exchange. And if you use the first link below the video in the description and in the pinned comment, that first link below the video will take you to this page right here over on the 2bit crypto exchange, which by the way is a no KYC exchange and is an exchange that I personally use myself. And as you can see on this page right here, 2bit is currently celebrating their 3rd birthday with a massive prize pool, huge prizes, huge rewards here, simply just by trading crypto using that link. As you can see, 3.5 million USDT in a grand prize pool just by trading crypto over on 2bit using that first link below the video. So obviously, if you're going to be trading crypto anyway or preparing to take the next trading opportunity, you might as well check this out, sign up, get set up, ready to go to take advantage of major opportunities here. Once again, first link below the video to 2bit. And remember, 2bit is also a no KYC exchange. But with that being said, taking a quick look at the Bitcoin dominance chart on the daily time frame. And right now, for the most part, the Bitcoin dominance is somewhat neutral. Obviously, we have been on a slight little pullback more recently, but overall, in terms of the larger trend we're in, we're not really looking overly bullish or overly bearish at the moment, which means a lot of the major altcoins out there on average will still likely be performing very similar to whatever Bitcoin does. So not a lot changed here over the last one day. And if we're taking a look at the 3-day Ethereum price chart, we're still trying to play out this oversold signal, just like on the 3-day Bitcoin price chart. Obviously, these two price charts look almost identical. And so right now, once again, still trying to play out the oversold signal, ultimately in a bit of a range at the moment in the somewhat short to midterm, talking about a period of weeks, if not months. Obviously, the last time we saw something like this, it was a little over 1 month. It was end of November. It started all of December and of course early January, and around mid-January in fact is where it basically ended and we continued the larger bearish trend. And so right now, once again, we're potentially still in a similar situation in the somewhat short to midterm here compared to what we saw back here around end of 2025, but ultimately still within the larger multi-month bearish trend. And if we're taking a look at the daily Ethereum price chart, right now the price of ETH is continuing to perfectly bounce in this same sideways price range I've been talking about for weeks now. In fact, for almost a month now, I've been talking about this exact same sideways price range, talking about this support and this resistance. First of all, this support is still sitting at give or take 1.8K. In fact, slightly above 1.8K, around 1810 to 1820, acting as key support to watch out for. And as for resistance, we have a lot of resistance starting at just above 2.1K, really at around 2150 as a strong level of resistance. And so despite whatever happens in the short term on the smaller time frames, it's still quite likely that at least over the next few days, possibly even another couple of weeks, potentially, the price will remain within this range right here. Is a very likely scenario, bouncing between support and resistance. But remember, this is just a somewhat short to mid-term movement, a consolidation during the much larger or longer term bearish trend that we're technically still within. We've not yet fully confirmed the end of the larger trend. And if we're taking a look at the shorter term, looking at the 2-hour Ethereum price chart, obviously just like Bitcoin on the 2-hour time frame, Ethereum is also currently playing out an oversold signal very nicely here in the 2-hour Ethereum RSI. We hit oversold, confirmed oversold, which means expect most likely some sort of bounce coming next to reset that RSI out of oversold. And now, once again, an oversold signal by itself does not guarantee that this is the bottom. It is possible that we can ultimately go lower at some stage later on, but just in the shorter term, once again, this signal does indeed suggest suggest that it is quite likely we're going to see some sort of bounce, which is obviously already playing out right now. And in fact, if this bounce continues the way it's been going for, let's just say, the next 12 to 24 hours, if this ultimately continues, then soon enough, we could see the RSI be drawn towards overbought and hit overbought. And if that happens, if we see an overbought signal confirm here on the 2-hour Ethereum price chart, for example, then of course, that's the opposite to an oversold signal, meaning we went too far to the upside too quickly, and we're now needing some time to cool off, which means most likely a bit of a pullback coming next if we first reach overbought, which obviously right now we're not there just yet, which means technically there is still a little more room towards the upside here, potentially still to go just in the short-term moves. But remember, this is all talking about very shorter-term moves in the price. Ultimately, this is all making up a larger range that we're still currently in here on the daily Ethereum price chart. And if we're taking a look at the price of XRP on the weekly time frame, in terms of the longer-term multi-month bearish trend, technically we're still in that trend. We've not yet fully confirmed the end or the reversal out of this much larger bearish trend, because at least for now, this bearish divergence is technically still active. And in terms of the price structure, obviously still not looking good. But in terms of the shorter term moves, we're still testing and at least for now, still holding this crucial area of support here, which is still sitting in between around $1.30 to $1.40. So continue to expect a lot of support in between $1.30 to $1.40. But if we ultimately see a confirmed break below $1.30, especially with candle closes, especially on the weekly time frame, candle closes below $1.30, and especially if we fail to get back above that area, in that situation, we could likely see a very easy move down towards around $1.13. And below that level, the next massive area of support is in between around 90 cents to $1. And in the meantime, while the price of XRP is still currently holding that $1.30 to $1.40 support area, of course, we're still also trying to play out this oversold signal. It's already kind of played out here over the last couple of weeks, but potentially if, for example, Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. remain in these sideways price ranges, it is quite likely that XRP will play out something similar to whatever Bitcoin and Ethereum are doing, at least in terms of shorter term moves, which means overall, expect the price of XRP to remain in a bit of a range, at least in the shorter term, not doing anything too spectacular, either to the upside or to the downside, at least in terms of short term moves. But remember, that's still just a shorter term break during the much larger bearish trend, which means it's likely that at some stage, maybe in, let's just say a few weeks from now, for example, it's possible we could ultimately continue that larger bearish trend later on, kind of like what we saw just here, a bit of a break during the trend and then the continuation of the trend later on. And if we're taking a look at the price of Solana, it's a somewhat similar situation here for Solana, as especially Ethereum on the 3-day time frame and on the daily time frame. Obviously, right now Solana technically still within the much larger multi-month bearish trend, but the somewhat short to mid-term situation is that right now we're still just bouncing around very sideways, as we can see right here, bouncing between support and resistance. First of all, we still have a lot of support at $75 to $80 and a lot of resistance in between $95 to $105, but we also have some short-term resistance here at pretty much exactly $90. And of course, another reason as to why we're playing out this choppy sideways price action holding above this support is also due to the fact that we're still trying to play out this oversold signal in the 3-day Solana RSI, which means either most likely choppy sideways price action or a slight little bullish relief coming next. And so far it's been mostly sideways price action, as we can see, which is very similar to what we saw around end of November, entering into all of December and even early January, basically entering into early this year. As we can see, a lot of sideways price action made up of short-term bearish and short-term bullish moves, but that was occurring during the much larger bearish trend. Right now, we're potentially still in a similar situation to that, what we are seeing right now. And if we're taking a look at the shorter term here on the 2-hour time frame, it's almost identical to the short term for Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. Previously, obviously, we played out this bullish divergence very nicely here. Then we hit well into overbought, telling us that we went too far to the upside too quickly. We're likely going to see a bit of a pullback, cooling off and resetting out of overbought, which obviously happened very nicely here. And then over the last 1 day, we continued that pullback a little lower to the point where we hit oversold, the opposite to the overbought signal, meaning we went too far to the downside too quickly, at least in terms of the short-term moves here. And we now need some time to reset back towards the upside, which is what is now happening. Obviously, we're now playing out the bounce, resetting out of oversold. And like I've been saying throughout the video, if this bounce continues a little longer, especially at the rate that we're going, potentially within the next one day, we could soon approach overbought. And if we actually confirm an overbought signal here in the 2-hour Solana RSI, obviously just like the last couple of times we confirmed an overbought signal, we're likely going to see some sort of cool off, some sort of pullback following that signal if it confirms. But remember, we're not there just yet. And so those are the key signals and levels to watch out for moving forward in the shorter term. In the current situation, what is happening right now, still playing out the oversold signal. But remember, all of this is talking about short-term moves. Ultimately, we're still just bouncing around in that same range, obviously relatively sideways between support and resistance. And if we're taking a look at Chainlink on the 3-day time frame, it's a very similar situation, still in a larger multi-month bearish trend, but the short to mid-term situation, talking about a few weeks, maybe even a month or so, ultimately we're still just bouncing around between support and resistance, relatively sideways on the price chart, in between roughly $7.90 to $10. First of all, $7.90 to $8.50 is the area of support to watch out for, and $9.50 to $10 is a strong area of resistance to watch out for. We're also still trying to play out this oversold signal in the 3-day Chainlink RSI, which is yet another cause as to why we're seeing this choppy sideways price action bouncing between support and resistance. And if we're zooming further into the short term, looking at the 2-hour Chainlink price chart, just like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, etc., Chainlink is also playing out an oversold signal in the 2-hour Chainlink RSI. Obviously, like I've been saying throughout the video, we continued a little lower over the last one day to the point where we confirmed this oversold signal, which, like I explained in my last video, before that happened, I said if we confirm that oversold signal, if we dip down here in the RSI, expect most likely a bounce following that signal. And obviously that's now exactly happening. Once we confirm that signal, we're now seeing the bounce. But ultimately, this bounce is just simply partially at least undoing the previous bearish move, which undid the previous bullish move, so on and so forth, which is the definition of a choppy sideways price range. Obviously just bouncing around relatively sideways on the price chart, not really in a strong trend to either direction, just seeing shorter term bullish and shorter term bearish movements. But also, like I've been saying throughout the video, if this bounce continues, especially at the pace it's on, if this bounce continues, let's just say over the next 12 to 24 hours, we could soon likely hit overbought. And if we see that overbought signal confirm, which obviously has not yet confirmed right now, but if we see an overbought signal confirm, if this bounce ultimately continues, then like I've been saying throughout the video, an overbought signal means we'll likely start slowing down the bullish price action and most likely see a bit of a pullback following that signal. But we're not there just yet. I'm just letting you know in advance, if we continue this bounce, watch out for that signal as a potential warning signal in terms of short-term moves. And remember, if you want to trade any of these moves in the price of any crypto, check out the links below this video to those exchanges if you want to take advantage of massive bonuses only available using those links to certain exchanges. And if you want to actually know how you can trade crypto, no matter what direction the price goes, to profit at basically all times in the market, then make sure to watch these videos popping up right here on your screen, because the video in the top left shows you how you can profit from bullish or bearish price action using long positions or short positions, and the video in the bottom left shows you how you can easily profit from choppy sideways price action. But anyway, that is everything that I have to say for today. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.